Managing around these risks and understanding the cash flow from the very beginning of the job is absolutely critical. Because if you don't think you're going to win the job, then you're probably not. You need to have a mindset into these jobs to protect yourself. You're taking on a tremendous amount of risk. You have to be compensated for that risk. And those terms of when you're paid, how you're paid, if you're going to be paid. You cannot bid a project thin and withstand these type of problems and also have paid when paid or paid if paid. Now, someone might be sitting there saying, oh, Scott, so easy for you to say while you're sitting here talking to this camera. You don't realize I'll never win that job. And what I'm going to tell you is, then don't take that job. Because if you need this job, get through your year, then that means you need this job to be successful. And those situations that I just explained are things you cannot avoid. They're out of your control. But yet, if they happen, they're going to be in your pain box, and they're going to be something you are going to have to manage. And that's just the risk I'm talking about. That's the risk that's not worth you taking on a job like this. Welcome to the Construction MF'ers podcast. I am Scott Peper, CEO and founder of Mobilization Funding. I'm just going to dive right into some stories. Today, you're getting just me. No guests, just stories. I'm going to talk to you about a contractor, electrical contractor, who had a great job with the Army Corps of Engineers through a prime. So they're sub to the prime. Well, as many of you and some of you may know from working in the government, the Army Corps is notorious for having different reasons they need to delay things. Sometimes it's payments, sometimes it's design, sometimes it's things that change, sometimes they make up their mind differently. All kinds of stories we've heard. And that's the story that happened to this contractor today. So get out on the job, 50% of the way through the project, all the underground electrical's in, they're working on the actual structure, and the Army Corps decides that there's an issue with the design of the building and it's going to impact the entire project. Now, everybody can leave the job. They'll actually even pay you to mobilize. However, no money is going to flow off that job until they take the next 8 weeks and figure out this design. And not only is that 8 weeks long, but they're not working efficiently and they don't actually care how long it takes. Everyone assumes that you can just jump right back on that. However, here's the problem. You've ordered material, the schedule was set, you have a bond in place, you have people you owe money to, you may or may not even be cash flow positive yet on the project, and now you have a real disaster on your hands where your subs and suppliers want to be paid. You've tried to get this money and capital from them. It won't be released. They're not paying the prime's not paying you. You have paid when paid language. They have paid if paid language. Everyone's having a problem, and including your prime, who maybe is not the most versed or seasoned on a government project for the Army Corps, and now everything's just rolling downhill. What do? The emotional and financial stress continues to build. You're trying to push your suppliers off. You thought 3 weeks was going to turn into 4, 4 turned into 5. You're hoping by maximum week 6 you're getting paid, you're back on the job. You're asking your prime, the prime's trying to help. You can tell pressure's mounting. Your suppliers need to be paid. People are now threatening your bond. All of a sudden, 8 weeks goes by and out comes the project. New design, Army Corps changes. It seems like minor tweaks. They're having you do new submittals, new drawings, new things you need before payment will come. All of these things happen. This is what can happen on these types of jobs. If you're not ready for them, if you haven't risk mitigated against them, if you don't have enough margin built into them to manage and handle these type of things, this can become a really quick disaster. What I want to talk about here is ways you can prepare for this, ways you can avoid it, and when it does, or if it does happen to you, how you can still come out a winner. All right, as we all know, cash flow on a construction project is absolutely critical. It's one of the most important things, if not the most important thing to success or failure on any project. You could have the best bid, you could have the best margin, you could have deposits paid to you sooner. The problem is, if you have more cash going out the door than you have coming in from the project, at any point throughout, you're going to need a lot of cash from somewhere else to get this project cash flow positive. That is just the way it works, and it's very difficult. So, Managing around these risks and understanding the cash flow from the very beginning of the job is absolutely critical, especially when you're going to be working on a government project, one with the Army Corps of Engineers, or any project, but especially in the example I gave. So, how can we fix that? Well, first, let's do a couple things. Let's start with the bid process. When you're bidding this job, you have to build in contingency profit, contingency margin, contingency cost. You have to build that project up high enough that this is going to be a project you're seriously relying on for your year, and it has to go well for you to be successful, then you have to make sure it goes well. And the only way to do that is to build enough risk mitigation in there for the risk you're taking. If there is a project delay of 6-8 weeks, or a payment delay, or the prime screws something up, you have to be able to withstand that storm, and there has to be enough profit in there. Now, that profit has to be also paid to you throughout the project. So make sure not only do you have enough profit in there, but you're going to collect that profit unless you finish the job or are paid. So you need to make sure you have proper terms in there as well. And those terms of when you're paid, how you're paid, if you're going to be paid. You cannot bid a project thin and withstand these type of problems and also have paid when paid or paid if paid. Now, someone might be sitting there saying, oh, Scott, so easy for you to say while you're sitting here talking to this camera. You don't realize I'll never win that job. And what I'm going to tell you is, then don't take that job. Because if you need this job to get through your year, then that means you need this job to be successful. And those situations that I just explained are things you cannot avoid. They're out of your control. But yet, if they happen, they're going to be in your pain box, and they're going to be something you are going to have to manage. And that's just the risk I'm talking about. That's the risk that's not worth you taking on a job like this. Now, if you're a bigger company and you have 35, 40 projects going on at a time, and one of them is the Army Corps and it gets delayed 6-8 weeks, who cares? You can move people from one place to the next. You can withstand something like that. But typically, as in the case I was explaining here, these are the kind of scenarios where someone actually needs this job. This is one of the 2 or 3 jobs they might actually be on. It's one of the jobs they need to put their crew on. If that job's not happening, their crews are sitting at home. Payroll's building. You don't have a place to put them, etc. So these are the kinds of things I'm telling you that need to be managed and accounted for and planned for as if they're going to happen. So, how do we go about preparing for them and avoiding those cash flow disasters? Well, first and foremost, it starts at the bid, as we talked about. How do you build enough profit into that? Well, you got to figure out the contingencies. So, and the way I would do it using this example is I would bid it as if everything was going to run smooth. And then I would say, okay, what if there's a 60-day delay on this job? Can I cover my labor for 60 days if they're direct employees? If it's subcontract labor, do I have the right terms where they can work on another project? I can't pay them. Do I have to maintain their compensation as well? If I give them a 6 or 8 week delay, are they going to go to another project and then not come back to mine? These are the things you need to think about. You might need to actually take 5, 6, 7 weeks of labor, build it into that project, and have that as part of your cost. Now, of course, if the project goes smooth, everything goes on time, then you just have a lot extra margin in there. But if it doesn't, you have contingency for those costs. How are you going to handle supplier terms? Well, if there's a 6 or 8 week delay and you're going to owe your supplier money, do you have enough money up front that you can handle paying that supplier at day 30 when you're not going to get paid for another 30, 45, 50 days? Who knows? If you don't, do you have terms with that supplier that you can pay them when you're paid? That would be very helpful. If you don't have the right terms and you don't have the right margin or cash in there, do you have sources of funds that you can withstand or compensate to use for those material items to float you through that 6 or 8 week period? Building out your cash flow and planning for these necessities is critical. Just adding an extra couple points of margin as fluff isn't going to help you. It needs to be strategic. Like, what does 6 weeks worth of labor cost me? Add that dollar number in there, and then that is what it is. Just pure and simple. And then you know you have those numbers in there as fluff. All right, so we've talked about cash flow. We've talked about the terms. We've talked about different ways to mitigate around this. And I know what you might be thinking. I'm never going to win this job if I do all these things. And you know what? You're probably right. You won't win the job. Because if you don't think you're going to win the job, then you're probably not. But if you do think you're going to win the job, but you're just bidding it properly for what you need to withstand to make sure you can execute that properly, then you actually have a good shot at winning it. Even if you get called in or your bid's higher and people are saying why, You can let them know, oh, I have extra stuff built in here for a 6 or 8 week delay. And then maybe that conversation will say, well, okay, well, let's lower your price on that. And then maybe you can negotiate a better term. Like, I can't sign paid when paid or paid if paid. If I sign paid when paid or paid if paid, then I have to have this extra margin in here in order to accommodate for that. You can be very transparent. You can be very open with that in your buyout or just upfront in your conversation, because everybody knows these kinds of things happen all the time. And if you don't plan for them, somebody's going to get hurt and you can't be you. Now, everyone's sitting here saying, okay, great, Scott, cash flow works awesome. I'll build my cash flow out. Some people might say, what does that even mean? Others may say, great, how do I do that? Some may say, I build that out, but it still doesn't change anything. We have a free cash flow tool on our website that we designed specifically to use for these types of items. And why did we do that? When we partner with clients on a project, we're making a loan to them to execute a specific job. That means we have to know what the cash flow looks like for a couple reasons. One, we need to know how much money someone needs. We need to know how much do they need and when. For example, someone might need $200,000 or $300,000 to execute a project, but nobody needs all that money up front. They don't need to pay for that money up front either. So we need to figure out, okay, where in the stages of the 3, 4, 5 month job do they actually need that $200,000 or $300,000, and then putting it in place. All of those little nuances that we had to figure out in order to be able to help somebody, we had to build a cash flow tool for that. Turns out that cash flow tool, just like it's great for us, it's great for the contractor too. All of the answers you need, all of the information you're looking for, all of the ability to be able to decide and make proactive decisions on your project while you're on the project, but more importantly, before you even start, are right there now in front of you. And when you are armed with that kind of information to be able to execute those decisions, it is extremely easy for you to be able to avoid mistakes, as opposed to walking onto that job thinking you have it set up right. Even if you plan for the best you possibly can, but you don't have a cash flow to know, you're still going to get stuck sometimes. Oftentimes, when you get out on that job, you're 4, 5, 6 weeks in, and something happens, or you're 4, 5, 6 weeks in, and you learn about the thing you didn't know from the beginning, and now it's hitting you right in the head, and you're trying to figure it out. Our cash flow tool is on our website, mobilizationfunding.com. Go to the resources tab, cash flow page, and you can pull it right down. Fill it out. All you need is to load your email and it'll be sent right to you, and you'll have all the information at your fingertips. And that is the best way to utilize that tool to be able to access the type of information we're talking about and avoid the kind of mistakes we're referring to. So let's talk about the details of the cash flow tool. You've never used one before, might sound intimidating. Yes, it comes in the form of Excel. Doesn't have to, but it does. It also doesn't have to be that way for you. You can actually just tab through and answer questions. So what do you actually need to fill out the cash flow tool? Great question. Here's how it looks. Take your bid sheet. You've factored in the labor cost. You've factored in your material cost, equipment, ancillary items, miscellaneous items, maybe travel, per diem. Who knows what you've got in there, but you have a way from your bid sheet of all the costs. Imagine a tool where you could log in and map out the labor for the project using your bid sheet. Map out the cost of material using your bid sheet. Map out the schedule, the way you've designed it for your project with your team. Take all of your estimates, all of your job costs, load them in piece by piece, or as a general rule of thumb, you can also just load them in one shot. And then this tool will break them out weekly for you and how you need to spend them based on the terms you have with your suppliers, with your contractors, with your vendors, etc. And it will give you exactly what the cash needs are of the whole project. So let's use an example. For easy math, let's say it's a $500,000 job, $500,000, and you have $400,000 of cost. This tool will tell you exactly how you're going to spend that $400,000. If labor is $150,000 of the $400,000, how that $150,000 gets spent week by week all the way through the job. How that $200,000 of material is spent week by week, or when it's ordered and when it's due throughout the project. And then all the miscellaneous items making up the extra cost. It's all mapped out there for you, super easy. You tab through, we ask the question, you fill it in from your bid sheet, and the rest is done for you. Simple and easy. You do not have to be a spreadsheet whiz. All right. So let me share a couple stories with you on the cash flow tool that's helped folks in our world, in our network that we've seen before. We had an excavating contractor who had a large project. Think like for them, it was a $4.5 million job. It was big for them. They were stepping onto it. It was going to be for a school, brand new school being built. They were going to put all the underground, clear all the land, get everything set up and established before the project even really got off the ground. They were going to be completed and done, doing everything on their end. Well, it turns out that they had equipment costs and they were renting a majority of their equipment they did not own. The equipment cost alone was going to be $1.5 million of their $5 million project, just the rental fees alone of that. Now, they're using their typical vendor. They're using their typical supplier for those costs. They had their regular pricing. It just happened to be a way bigger job, something they never thought of. So they went to their normal supplier. Well, it turns out with the terms they have with their supplier, pay, order it, use it now and pay monthly, which is 30 days, the terms, it was really eating up their job. They could see that they're going to have to invest almost $2.5 million into this $5 million project before they would even get cash flow positive. When we showed them, and they laid out the cash flow to them, we showed that to them, they were thinking they would only need $300,000 or $400,000 to cash flow this job because they were thinking about the labor component. Well, it turns out, not only is it a $2.5 million price tag, but it's the equipment cost and the rental of the equipment and the terms they had with the equipment that was really eating them up. In addition to that, because it was such a high cost, even though they won the job, it was really hurting and impacting their margin. So we pointed this out to them, said, look, it's really not $300,000 or $400,000. You could get away with it. You could get away with doing this job with about $850,000. But the reason it's $2.5 million versus $800,000 is all in your equipment. You're having to pay these equipment suppliers 30 days before you're ever paid for them, and you also have $500,000 invested in this equipment before you even get your first payment back. So what we need to do is figure out how you can work around this equipment and figure out a better way to do it. Either pay for it, get a better cost, but more importantly, you need better terms. Seeing that up front, for a contractor who's never laid out the cash flow, they were easily and quickly able to say, you know what, I'm not going to go with my normal vendor. Let me go to my other vendors. I can look and actually shop. If I'm going to spend $1.5 million, let me shop that $1.5 million of revenue I'm going to give to one of these suppliers, and let me see what kind of terms they can give for me. After all, this is for the brand new school in our county. The money's good. City and county are obviously paying for it. And so let me go shop this. Turns out, now they found the problem, they identified the problem. They realized, A, I'm going to have to invest more than $400,000 in this job. B, it's $2.5 million. C, it could be $800,000 if I adjust for this equipment cost. So they did. And they were able to go to a different vendor, actually get a 10% savings, which to them was another $150,000 in profit. And they were able to get 60-day terms, but they just had to work out with the prime on the contract to be able to make sure that that supplier could be paid, which they did quickly and easily. And so communicating with their supplier, connecting them to the prime, making sure everybody was on the same page allowed them to get a 10% savings and 60-day terms instead of 30. It reduced their ability to do the job. It reduced the amount of money they had to put into the job from $2.5 million down to $800,000, of which they had $300,000 or $400,000 accounted for. And now they just need to solve for $400,000 need across the project from a cash flow perspective. All of that from just taking their bid sheet, plugging it in this tool, and getting the cash flow needs. That is the kind of information that you're going to be able to utilize, the decisions you'll be able to make, and the kind of choices and outcomes you can expect. Now, we've shared a story. We've told you what disaster looks like. Many of you listening to this probably have been through that disaster or something just like it. What I'm hoping and I'm imploring for you guys to do today is use the free tools that are out there. Whether it's our cash flow tool on our website or someone else's, I don't care. What I care about most is that you understand the cash flow of the project, understand the decisions you have to make, the choices you have available to you, and start making the moves you need to have a mindset into these jobs to protect yourself. You're taking on a tremendous amount of risk. You have to be compensated for that risk. You cannot take on extra risk, especially the kind of risk that you can't manage or you don't know how to manage, that has nothing to do with you, like the Army Corps of Engineers changing the design and delaying a project 8 weeks. You can't impact that. That's nothing you can do, but you're going to feel the effects of that. And so I'm imploring you to use these cash flow tools. You know what kind of problems can occur. Map out those problems in your cash flow, plan for them, adjust for them in your bid, push them forward, and go into your projects eyes wide open. And then you can expect to make sure that your profit that you've put into your bids, you're able to realize. You can expect that you'll be able to sleep better at night, understanding your cash flow, understanding your project, taking care of your employees. If this video has helped you, please pass this on to your friends and family. Please let your customers know. Let your friends know in the business. Let other industries know. Share this podcast, this episode, this cash flow tool with as many folks as you can. Let them know. These are the ways we're going to be able to help save not only your business, but any other business in the construction industry from problems that they do not need to occur and live with when they can plan for them properly. I hope you guys have a great week, and God bless you.